I grew up in a day and age where some of you may understand this, I guess, as I get older. There's certain things culturally that we do, some things that were connected to religion, some things that change. I can remember there was a time when you didn't wear hats, especially during prayer, but sometimes even out in society. I was refused once breakfast being served at a breakfast place in Sarnia, I'll never forget, because I had my hat on for breakfast. And I also remember I was one of the first, in my community of friends to have gotten an earring. And yes, if you look carefully, I still have the hole in my left ear. And at the time, that was something that was a little bit offensive to some in a different generation. And I can recall at church, two different individuals, because I had been going to church at this time. I wasn't really interested at that time that much, but I was starting to change. And I remember one brother pulled me aside and said, "Jamie, that's not right. It says something, it's offensive." And, I kind of just brushed that off. And another brother, it was quite offensive to him as well. And I thought, if it's offending these guys, I remember I was starting to read my Bible and I read Paul, he talks about not offending others. So I thought, you know what? I will just trick them. I will take it out Sunday mornings and I will wear it the rest of the week. That's a good way to trick them. No, I won't wear it on Wednesday night. I won't wear it on Sunday morning. And so I did that for some time. But until the one night when I was visiting Bianca at she worked at a card store in the mall. And this family from church happened to be in town at the time at the Shoppers Drug Mart right across. And, hey, how are you? And I walked over and just, started talking. And all of a sudden I could see the man's bottom lip start to quiver as he was staring at my left ear. And I thought, something's wrong. Uh-oh. He saw my earring. Now, I should have said, he had pulled me aside a couple months earlier. I was helping him out at home with something. He says, "I'm really proud of you for getting rid of that earring." And he gave me $20. And I don't know if that was because of that, for helping out. But when that happened, I realized I had devastated him. And actually, I was willing at that time. I said, it's not worth it. I took it out for good. He would never have known that after that was a teaching moment for me, that I didn't need it. I wanted it. It was cutting edge cool at the time, and yet, and some won't understand. Even my employer at McDonald's is like, "You can't have that. Put a piece of tape on." So times were different, how you roll with them and what you do. But the point that I'm trying to make is I tried to hide it. And it worked for a short time. And sometimes, though, we can hide things from each other, but we try to hide things sometimes from God. And you need to realize you cannot hide things from God. And there were many times when I would try to hide things, and God would have a funny way of embarrassing me with them. And, I realize that, I'm not the only one, but, I think back to King David. Here's King David trying to hide his sin with Bathsheba, and God has a way of showing the world, "Hey, David, not only do I know, not only is everyone else going to know now, but everyone else for the rest of eternity is going to know about what you did." So I remember, some of the things that we do and we try to hide, and I've learned over the years. I've been embarrassed many times. And there are many times that I've been out doing something that I shouldn't have done, especially in my younger years where I was like, who's going to see me? When, I told the story, my getting caught by my parents doing, I was in town, I had lied, I wasn't supposed to be back in town with their car, I lied and said I was staying in Toronto, and Mom happened to be at the mall when I came back to pick up some friends to bring them back for a party. Mom happened to be at the mall, in that store in the basement that she never went to the mall. She never went to the basement. And I was coming up, I said, "Meet me around back, I'll park at the parkade, and I'll meet you downstairs. No one will ever, find out." And that moment, I was coming up the escalator, Mom's going down, and I was just like, "Mom?" And she was like, "What are you doing in town?" Right? And so that's a story for another day. I'll never forget that. And so from then on, I look over my shoulders when I was doing things I shouldn't, or I wait for God's punishment. Do you ever wonder if you've done something, if God's going to punish you for it? And sometimes I accept things in life. I'm like, "Lord, hey, whatever happens, I deserve it. It's okay. I understand. Bad things will happen to me," and I'll be like, "Hey, listen, even if it's something long ago." And now I'm not trying to downplay grace. I'm not trying to downplay grace. But sometimes sin has natural consequences There are things that people buried 20 years ago that are coming back to haunt them today. And that's what God tries to teach us. Sin has consequences. Jesus met this man and this lame man, the pool of Bethsaida, and he says to him, stop sinning, or something worse doesn't happen. And this could be either, because the sin could cause him more problems, or maybe God would allow something. God would send a problem in order to wake people up. They used to believe that when you did something wrong, God would do something to you. If you were sick or ill, you must have done something wrong. When they met the blind man in John 9, they say, who sinned, his parents or this guy? And in that case, it was neither. But the fact that they even believe that, where'd that come from? All you got to do is open up the Old Testament. Listen, God is a God who would judge his people. God is a God who would teach lessons. And sometimes the things that happen to us are the consequences of our sin. And so, when will that day come when God visits you? When God calls to account that sin? How much better is it when God can come early before that judgment day and call your sin out and get it exposed and dealt with, so that when judgment day comes, you don't have to worry about that sin that 20 years ago is going to come back to give you eternal damnation. That sin's been taken care of through Christ. But if you've never known Christ, if no one's brought the gospel to you, how will you believe? How will you know? Will you become free? So this next story is a story about a man who had a lot to hide. A man who was greedy and selfish, who had taken advantage of others. A man who was really despised and hated. And judgment came to visit him one day. Jesus came to visit him to try and get him to open his eyes and to see. And we sing a song about this man. The kids will know this song. And we sing about this man who was a wee little man. He climbed up in a sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see, right? And his name is Zacchaeus. Well, there's a lot more to the story of Zacchaeus than just the story of a guy climbing a tree. I want to take you to Jesus' final journey. He's going from Galilee to Jerusalem for the final time. And he's passing through Jericho. And there in Jericho, there were a lot of sycamore trees. Actually, not just sycamore trees. There were a lot of fig trees and palm trees. It was known as the city of palms. It was known as a city that has a lot of wealth. They had a lot of dates and spices and trees that gave a specific fragrance and resin, very valuable. There was a lot of money in Jericho. And so if you were a tax collector where there's a lot of money, there's a lot of extra money to be taken. And if you are a tax collector of tax collectors, if you are their chief, if you are their boss, don't think that, if they're living rich, don't think you're not going to be living better than they are. And this man, Zacchaeus, was a chief tax collector. Now, just so you understand Jericho, here's a little map. There is a residential area and a municipal area. This municipal area, and they've gone back and done archaeological digs and discovered some of the, the Roman place houses and structures and whatnot. And by the way, a couple of weeks ago we talked about the blind Bartimaeus, and Luke and Matthew. One says that Jesus was coming into Jericho. The other says Jesus is leaving. If Bartimaeus is on this road, Jesus is leaving one and he's coming into another before his hike up to Jerusalem for the last time. So both are right. As a matter of fact, it's not a contradiction at all. It's actually a clarification of details that people later on are like, oh wow, Jericho actually was separated between two different areas of the city. And Jericho was one of the lowest cities on earth and the climb up to, well, it's not very far to Jerusalem. If you count the incline, it's quite a distance there. And the road is dangerous. And so Jesus is making his way down to Jerusalem, and he stops here at Jericho, not far from the Jordan River. Now, the story goes that Jesus was passing through, and this chief tax collector wanted to see Jesus. He wanted to see Jesus while he was passing through, but he was not able to because there was a crowd and he was a short man. So running ahead, He climbed up a sycamore tree, and you saw what they looked like, strong structure, so that he could just see Jesus. He never planned to have an encounter. As a matter of fact, we don't even know why he wanted to see Jesus. I mean, wouldn't that be embarrassing if Jesus is walking past and he looked up in the tree and he said, "There you are, you no good, rotten tax collector," right? I mean, that's what everyone else was thinking of him. Because what Jesus did is Jesus looked up in the tree and he said, "Zacchaeus," he knew his name, and he said, "I got to come to your house today." And when Jesus did that, everyone else was mad. All who saw it began to complain. All the people were upset that this Jesus, who everyone wanted to see, there were crowds to see him. Everyone wanted time with Jesus, and he wasted his time on this wicked, evil chief tax collector who was wealthy. "Jesus, why would you go to that guy's house?" Maybe some people were accusing Jesus and whispering about him. You just want some good food? You want to be friends with the wealthy? Maybe it was giving Jesus a bad reputation. But Jesus didn't think about any of that. And if they knew Jesus, they would know that there was a tax collector whose life was changed, who followed Jesus, named Matthew. And so here's another tax collector who Jesus is trying to change his life. He was a chief tax collector, and he was very wealthy. He was rich. And the people were angry and complained. Now, the story, we're going to stop the story there for a minute. I want you to think about how many people in your life that you have as a Zacchaeus. You could probably make a list of some Zacchaeuses. You've maybe never met them. Maybe there's a few names in our own city who you're angry at, and you shake your fist when you drive by one of their establishments or some of the apartments they own and the rent they're charging, or whatever it is, it makes you angry with those people. They are unjust, they are sinners, and they are frustrating people. Do they need to hear about Jesus? Do they need a visit from Jesus? If Jesus came to town and he skipped out visiting with us this morning because he was visiting with one of those people, would you be angry with Jesus, or would you say, "Jesus, good for you"? And if you think that it's good for Jesus, I am so thankful Jesus would go and talk to them. Then why aren't you and I, as the hands and feet of Jesus, talking to these people? Instead, we drive by, we shake our heads, we get angry with them, and some of us may even curse them or think, I'll pray for them all right. I'll pray that they die quickly. Right? Some of us get mad with these people. But are we visiting them? And we have all kinds of excuses why we're not going to people. We have a list of excuses. Maybe, you know what, I don't have time. I'm too busy to deal with people like that. They take up a lot of time. Maybe I'm not qualified. Sometimes, the very wealthy intimidate us. They won't listen to me. I have nothing to offer them. Or maybe they're very difficult to deal with. Maybe Zacchaeus was a difficult man. Rude, bossy. I can't deal with that person. They're not going to listen to me. And so we make excuses why we shouldn't be the ones to go. And sometimes we say, "You know what? Lord, send someone else." There's someone else who's got to be able to relate to them. Maybe a family member who's turned to Christianity, or someone that they work with. Someone else will do it. But ultimately, when we don't go, it usually comes down to a few things: time or fear. Listen, it's okay to be afraid. And number one, we need to be putting the time in. We'll come back to fear in a minute. We need to be putting the time in for people. If you think that, you know what, I just don't have time, and everyone's in a different stage of life. But you got to evaluate your time and where we're putting our time. We have a lot of time compared to a lot of people around around the world. And so I'm not so sure that time is a good excuse for us. I don't feel qualified. There's a lot of people that aren't qualified. Jesus didn't call the qualified. The apostles, Peter and those fishermen, they weren't qualified to start the church. Do you know the church in Antioch that grew bigger than the church in Jerusalem? Do you know how it started? You would think, well, it started with a bunch of qualified people who spent a lot of time studying mission work and how to reach out to the Gentiles. No, It started with a persecution and a bunch of people who just went up to Antioch and they had God in their heart and they just spread the word. And God was with them and great things happened. And that church outgrew the church in Jerusalem. Actually, most of your Bible, most of your New Testament, 13 of the letters written by Paul, the church in Antioch was the church who supported Paul and Barnabas, Paul and Silas in their mission work. And that all started from unqualified people. So don't say, we're unqualified. And don't say someone else will do it. First time I ever changed a tire, I bet you there was 1,000 people who drove past me and said someone else will do it. Because I stood there as a 16-year-old on the side of the 401 in the left-hand lane, trying to flag down every car I could for about 30 minutes, and not one person stopped to help me. So I got the instructions out of the back of the trunk and read how to do it myself, and I did it. But don't think someone else will do it, because maybe not. Maybe you were the someone else, and you just decided not to do it. And finally, don't be afraid. A lot of people were afraid. Nehemiah wanted to go back and rebuild the city. And Nehemiah was overwhelmed with fear when he went to the king. And he was a cupbearer for the king. You tasted first, and he had a relationship with the king. And the king said, "Why are you so sad? I can see something's wrong." He was so scared to ask the king. He even said a quick prayer in his head. "Lord, help me." The king said, "What do you want?" And he prayed. He needs help. But yet, God answered. God was with him, and his prayers were answered in a positive way. Gideon, when he was told to go, Gideon was afraid. God knew it. Over and over, Gideon's like, "Lord, is this really you?" He was kind of really challenging God. And then finally God says, "Look," God knew he was afraid. "Look, if you're still afraid, you go down and listen to what they're saying." And you think Gideon said, "Lord, you are with me. I saw what you've been doing so far. I'm not afraid of anything with you on my side." No, Gideon said, "Okay, Lord." He went down there and he listened in because he was afraid. And Samuel, when God said, "Samuel, Saul is now no longer king. I want you to anoint David." Samuel's like, "Lord, how can I anoint someone else? Saul is going to hear about it and kill me." He was afraid. This great prophet was afraid. But he went. Jeremiah, when God calls Jeremiah, "Don't say I'm only a youth. Do not be afraid of anyone, for I will be with you to rescue you." Jeremiah was afraid. Ezekiel, "You son of man, do not be afraid." Ezekiel had something to fear. And of course, even the Apostle Paul. Paul was afraid. God had to come to him and give him some strength and encourage him when he was in prison. The Lord said to Paul in a night vision, "Don't be afraid, but keep on speaking, for I am with you." We all need to have the attitude of Esther, who could have lost her life trying to do what God wanted. So she asked for prayers and fasting. And Esther sent this reply, "Go assemble the Jews. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And after that I will go to the king, even if it's against the law. And if I perish, I perish." She was afraid, but she was willing to go. And she changed history. So we will be afraid. We will be unqualified. We will find it time-consuming and difficult. But I want you to consider the outcome. You see, Jesus had to visit Zacchaeus. Why? There was another time Jesus had to go, and this is to the woman in Samaria. It says he had to travel through Samaria. Why? For that woman at the well, that sinful woman, he met her and changed her life. Well, she changed her life meeting Jesus. And that blind man, that happened so that, because God knew that this day would come when Jesus was going to heal and bring back his sight. Jesus had to visit the blind man and his life was changed. And with Zacchaeus, he looked up and he said, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, because it's necessary that I come to your house to stay. It's necessary. I have to do it." Consider the outcome. I want you to look at Zacchaeus' response. He came down quickly and he welcomed him joyfully. Zacchaeus wasn't afraid that I don't want him to come to my house. I don't want him to judge me. I don't want him to see everything that all the wealth I've accumulated. You see, people in difficult situations don't think that they're going to be closed to hearing the gospel of Christ. They have sometimes dealt with the challenges of life. We'll come back to this. They've sometimes, these people, they've had wealth and they've understood the deceptiveness of wealth, the destruction of lust, the downfall of pride. Sometimes they've understood the isolation of power, the emptiness of pleasure and materialism, the corruption of popularity, and the fading joy of worldly success. All the things that God teaches us, these things that people run after, all the things that people run after, and God teaches us, seek first the kingdom of God. And so sometimes the people who have run after these things, all people, they're waiting for a Jesus to come and knock on their door. And we see what happened to Zacchaeus. He listened to Jesus and he said, I'll give half my possessions to the poor. He heard Jesus. Jesus talked about giving to others. It's not about you, Zacchaeus. And so he was willing to sacrifice. I'll give half my possessions to the poor. And listen, Lord, if I've done wrong, if I cheated anyone, I'll pay back for it. I will make up for what I did wrong. He had a repentant heart. And Jesus said, today, salvation has come to this house because this man too is a son of Abraham. This man who people wrote off in his city. Everyone thought there's no sense in going to that guy. He is terrible. Jesus stepped out in love and showed us. He had to show us. Don't write people off. You know, Jesus didn't write us off. Just as Jesus wants us to knock on their door, guess what? Jesus is knocking on our door. You think you're the church? We think we're the church. Just like the 7 churches that Jesus talked to in Revelation. This is one of those churches, Laodicea. And he says, you know, you're lukewarm. You're caught up and you're living comfortable lives. And Jesus says, I'm here knocking at the door and you need to open the door and listen to me. You need to seek the things that God wants us to seek first. Wisdom, grace, and truth. Come and get gold from me, refined in the fire. White clothes, that grace that he provides, the wisdom that he provides. And the ointment to spread to open our eyes to the truth. And maybe then we'll realize that just as someone knew our wickedness and came and knocked on our door, that we are his hands and feet, and Jesus is sending us to knock on the doors of others. That Jesus is knocking, as he's knocked on our doors and he's waking up the church, he is sending us to go. You know, he says to Jeremiah, remember that? Lord, I'm only a youth. Don't be afraid, for I'll be with you to rescue you. I didn't show what he said before that. I chose you before I formed you in the womb. I set you apart before you were born. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. And as Jeremiah was sent to the nations, we are sent to the nations. We are sent out, as we're reminded in Matthew, go make disciples of all nations. Don't be afraid of them. I am always with you, Jesus says, to the very end of the age. I have put my words in your mouth. You'll be my witnesses, talking specifically to the 12, but the 12 pass this on, this witness of what Jesus has said and done. And as the Father sent me, I am sending you. We are sent to the world as Jeremiah is sent, and we are told not to be afraid. The difference is, if we're not afraid, are we taking the time? If we're not qualified, are we still willing to go? Well, don't forget, it's not our church. It's not all on our shoulders. One plants, one waters, but God does the growing. In 2023, in November, something wonderful happened with Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Some of you may recognize her. I know a few of you, Brandon, and a few others know her. She was Muslim early in her life, a refugee from Somalia. She got into Dutch politics, and then in the 2000s until 2023, she was, if not the most prominent female atheist in the world. Highly intellectual, very strongly opposed to, she worked alongside of Richard Dawkins. Some of you know him and his, the God Delusion, the book that he wrote. One of the 5 or 4 horsemen of atheism, they call them. Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, and Christopher Hitchens. And she was in their camp. She worked alongside. Richard Dawkins was so proud of her. And when she turned to Christ in 2023, November, she found that atheism, she said, life without any spiritual solace is unendurable. Indeed, very nearly self-destructive. Atheism didn't have the answer she needed. She saw the problems with Islam, and then she saw Christ and what he did. And one of the things that she said, and this was about a year later, she was talking to someone, she said, Christians at that time when she was living her life of atheism, Christians were writing me letters saying, we're going to pray for you, you're just misguided. She said, I think that alone defines for me the distinction between Christianity and mainstream Christianity and Islam. And she was talking about that, but obviously that had an impact on her life. Christians weren't giving up, and they still aren't giving up on praying for those people who much of the world would write off. For much of us, we'd be angry at those people, or much of the Christian world would write off. But really, we should be praying for those people. We should be loving those people. We should be visiting those people. And we should be doing our best to share with those people the love of Christ. As Jesus went and visited Zacchaeus and gave Zacchaeus the love that every human needs, may we continue to go in the world. And as God loved us, we love him with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And what? We love our neighbors as ourselves. May we go and give God the glory as we go and try and spread the gospel, the good news to all creation. Let's stand for our final hymn.